Simji Lava Binyamba the Song said, all those kissing to Dinmarcos over it, said Dondala, the Simji, giving Yamlen Java, and without giving Yamlen Cheku, Tisadi, Tisadi give Yamlen Lava, said Simji Yamlen Lavia the Karasan passion to the Jamni Chisum Goyada, passion to Yamlen Lavia the chair. That Simji Yamlen Java the Lava chair. That is that Lava. Nyambalo sumba sendala tondala manyamba che muji che nyamne che ko de hesa shi sumborwa tsa dini inza da manyan kisinga to kana shubare lana lele ya asa ani tambo ni jinga anje kang nyamne che gi yu de ani ya ko che aji ji de le nyamne che de ma xin ba do ba sa wa da tie zum da ni kare na samba ina ani nyamne ya ko che tu ma de dini inza 토바다 태선매바지 냠나디게 아오지 담보 가르치어봐바지 매바지 매고를 하고 그래서 왔다빈에 이나도 진배 냠는 제이나 진바디 근데 뭐와 진바 가는 실이 진발래 거래 진바 냠는 제단 간데리 세트 어두시는 신야다 근데 권조숨나 접수도나 안 접수도야 유 권조숨나 가라가리 세야다 근데 접수도야기 점도들라 아니 가는 실이 세용을 중야다 난 접수도야를 yar랍제 규로제 ane kare kore se de o chene ya wo xinwa che ya ko xinba che ane dene ane ya nyamren che ya le ya an chi ke pa so de je ben deva tembu che da deva tembu che ba che deva tembu che da dene nyamren che ge sam kunlo de ke tembu che ya nya ben de kunlo tembu che da nyamren che ge jo de ge ane tembu che an do chene tempoche nyamne cheda ndene anjik nyamne chebi kamle ya anjik yam lada lama da idam la soba da she ku shepdang ane she sada chebi ko ne ane chuo pu ya la soba de ne che ndu cheda andene gi rangi rangle tebi ke dangi dene ke chike tiba che dangi no tu cheba ne ti mare sambe ke dene ane de rang kyumsane chene ane dipale semya ane tiba cheba ina tibi tibu di ane 마선에 dunga pato meba nyongore chesa dine na dine ki tiba chene tibe ki tiba chene tibe ki tibu dunga nyongyo pa samta chene tiba dine tibu le chishin dane dine tiba ma cheba tsemba an dine chene kiwi nyamne chea tia rang shen semjen le kaiwi chidu yinsen de semjen kawar cheba sede chena semjen kawar cheba se shen le penbi ki tuanda shen penbi chidu jawa chewa kiwi jawa le besu chi zun kore nyamne che kore ye se che extend that kissing my tin shoe or what didn't show what I said.
Good evening. So last week we concluded by coming to a verse which presents how to protect the training of the mind from degenerating. And so we started to look at this brief outline last week. We'll continue with that tonight. So in the outline, it presented a number of practices or a number of qualities of mind to develop so as to protect the training of the mind from degeneration. So what does this term, first of all, what does this term training of the mind refers to? Well, in our context of the Bodhisattva, it refers to training the mind in love, compassion, and the six perfections. So how do we protect these trainings in our mind from degenerating? The first quality that was presented was developing definite conviction in each of the trainings. In other words, coming to understand them well in all their various aspects so that one has no doubt or qualm or uncertainty. So for example, in the practice of generosity, understanding its very entity, what it is, and how to engage in that training and how to engage it in the most skillful of ways. Or in a training such as the three jewels, one needs to understand what the three jewels are, the various qualities, the causes for going for refuge, and the various trainings of the refuge practice. The second quality to develop was that of absolute faith. It's faith in the various topics of the Dharma and so forth. And steadfast was also presented, steadfast in the sense of one's motivation being stable, not wavering, sometimes being a strong motivation, sometimes a bit wishy-washy, but one's motivation be stable, steadfast, and to one's effort, that one's effort is steadfast or continuous. One doesn't, one keeps one's mind and focus on the trainings in a continuous or steadfast manner. And then a further quality to develop is a respectful and polite attitude towards one's lama and so forth. And then in terms of in this process to develop good qualities to prevent the mind from degenerating, or to prevent the trainings in the mind from degenerating, we also need to look for and acknowledge when errors are made, when we recognize faults in our mind. And for this, one needs to develop a sense of shame. So shame is a virtuous mind by which we recognize their faults and see that as inappropriate. It's not in accordance with the kind of person we want to be. And then being with a further quality of apprehensive or fearful about not achieving our goal of enlightenment for the sake of others, we purify and refrain from further harm. Also, we develop a calm mind, a mind that's subdued, not under the influence of the afflictions. And all of this is done so as to bring about lasting happiness for others. So these were a number of qualities to develop so as to prevent the trainings in the mind from degenerating. Now, the 56th verse. Do not be discouraged by the innumerable wishes of the childish who are disharmonious with each other. Think with compassion. It is due to the arisal of afflictions that all this has emerged in their minds.
Yamlen di cheo gore di che chu mar sibe langdor ge namle yamlen cheo go ba kar kar yu ba che mo ba kar ge yago ge di ge tene ge namye ma shingen ma shin ba de la ma shi be ka sa de la ngi di chi ba sa chi tene ko gore chi ba sa.
First line in the Tibetan is our second line. The word childish. So childish, from our lived experience, refers to probably toddlers. So those who are very, very little, who run around and do a variety of things and are quite ignorant in the sense of they do not know right from wrong yet. They do not know what they should be doing and should not be doing. They are, in this sense, childish. So in the context of spiritual practitioners, those who are viewed as childish are those who do not know, for example, the Four Noble Truths, suffering and its causes, what suffering is, why one suffers, and that one can gain freedom from suffering and how to do so. In other words, someone who does not yet know what should be adopted, and what minds to cultivate and how to do so, and what should be abandoned, what minds that should be turned away from and how to do so.
Jiba yesterday, that's Ninga Tenegin, is so much of a pension meetimba, Gasa Yungo, Denege, and Mongo, all those meetimba, and she did Dutch and Jusemba Namgi, Shelia, Penichimbe, Yamlin, Che, Shen Chiglia, Chimbe Yamlet, Robert Roche, Delia, and the Chimarush, I check there. All those in the Roche, Yam, Kivigi, Kasore, that Roche, that Jimbat, Naya La Soba, the Koran, giving Yamlin Jaggy, loved in Naya La Soba. Dus cheba ina that jail do and then Pajo de Tawa Matumba, Pajo diki Chado Geje, Hamaka Cheta, no Kora Gea, and dus at Dihungures, and Dimase, and the Chigia, and Delia, Chick Jajus and Petelia, and Kerangi, Chike, College, the Malchi Minusake, and Tamuchi Minsa, the Dine Kunji, the Yungru Adine. Or the Negi, Pension between Jibai, Deva Namki, said 소수기 되바 단가이게 되바 미투바 인자 아니 데니 켄제데 데니 균주 제바도 콘로다 뉴모스네 또 콘로 개와 용거래 해서래.
The childish, those who do not yet know what are the minds to cultivate and therefore to act under the influence of, and what minds to abandon and therefore not to act under the influence of, because they are childish, because they lack this knowledge, they are often disharmonious with each other. They quarrel, they argue, they push one aside to try and get something. So this is just the everyday way of the world, because of being childish, because of lacking this knowledge. So the Bodhisattva, driven by compassion, reaches out to help them, to guide them, to recognize what to abandon and what to adopt. And so the Bodhisattva directly engages with the childish who are disharmonious. And in doing so, the advice for the Bodhisattva is, so for us now, the first line, do not be discouraged by their innumerable wishes. So here, the reality of engaging with those who do not yet know the Dharma well, and therefore are still following their afflictions. They are full of wishes or desires or wants. Moreover, when the Bodhisattva helps one, others are likely to get jealous and therefore give the Bodhisattva a hard time, being jealous of the help the Bodhisattva shows another. So these kinds of obstacles are to be expected when helping those so desperate in need.
Denigi Tuan Simchu check your Maria, Sim Kyocho Marandingi, or the call Robachi, Chiti Coronage, Bessa, Swandangin, the Robachena, and Chik Robachi, Genji, the call Coronage, and Dibasa, Sambata, and the Mitik, the she, they call Romagin, the Tagla, Romagin, and Tata, Robacheve, Majeva in the Kony to show Mari, need good Robachi, Continego, Condrigan, Yomo, Jesus, and Badadi, Timas, or Simbi, Simchu Chayungrua, or Dine Simchu Chagio Marejo. Denigi Mikoshin in the pension medium be currently Gitalia, Robert J.B. Genji, Gitalia, Tado, Gejo, Cocorner Sa, Denin Yomokeva in a Curandi, and the Jensen Curon, and Degi, Conjugi, Devil meeting Biggie, and the Yomokeva, T. Genji, the Curon, and the same Makivada, and this is Sim Chuchat, Sim Miki, Maku, Sim Makiva, and the Joa Mare, or Devan Mikoshin said.
So guarding your mind against discouragement is important, because when engaging with those who are spiritually immature, they are going to get jealous. They are going to place demands upon you. They are going to act in ways towards you or in response to you that is not ideal. Here, do not get provoked. Do not become discouraged. Do not give up. Rather recognize that by beings acting in this way, on one hand, this is the natural way that the childish act. Those who are controlled under the control of their afflictions will act in afflicted manner. Those whose mind is controlled by the afflictions will act in unskillful ways. So therefore, do not be provoked, do not be discouraged, do not give up. Rather, take these adverse circumstances as a sign that one needs to help evermore. The need is great. Beings are without a guide. They require direction, even if they do not recognize this themselves. And secondly, so in addition to recognizing the need to be of service, there's the need to develop oneself further so that one can be of ever more skillful one can be ever more skillful with how one interacts with others. This then is the skillful way to deal with jealousy from others, to deal with their various wants and desires and demands.
nyumon kyewa di rangwa yo mares, nyumon kyewa la rangwa yo mares khonsulia kasa tekilia. Chizan nyumon biki nyamande nyumon kyewa komship sabana pacha teniki komde wasa nyumon kyewa la rangwa yo mares, khonro kyewa la rangwa yo mares, sembeke teniki khonsulia teniki nyumon kyewa la rangwa mebare, tan nyingje sembeke nijo komya ta, an nijo komya, an tene maze, an kong ki nyumon dike deja khonro dike pa shiwar shuo sembeke kolya nyumon kyewa la rangwa yo ma nyingje ta, kwe yu khonro kyewa de shiwar shuo swe molam jaya ta, an kwe yu khonro di nge shiwar chigi sembeke dusin nyingtop kyewa re yajir ta, kanche le teniki khonro kyewa kansa dike la, tan kansa dike le nyingje ko rangwa yo ma kwe gyula nyumon khonro kyewa rangwa yo ma res, nyingje ta ko khonro kwe yu khonro di shiwar shuo sembeke molam jaya ta, teniki ane kwe yu khonro di nge shiwar chigi sembeke dusin nyingtop kyewa re yajir. Chizan tetagi semdi chungyam zerden da asidi semdi chungwa la rangwa yo mara khonro kyewa la rangwa yo mara nyingche sembi zerden nyingche tenpa. Dine kwe yu semdi ane khonro di shiwar shuwa suya molam jaya ta. Dine kwe yu khonro di nge shiwar chigi sembi kyo dusu nyingtop kyewa la soba du sang kore yeche de sungore.
So here, the practitioner should look upon these beings with wisdom, recognizing these beings for the pitiful situation that they find themselves in. Recognize that they have no control over their own mind. Their afflictions are running rampant. Despite yearning to be at peace, they are suffering right now under the control of these afflictions, and therefore are acting or speaking in an afflicted manner. This just shows that they are suffering. They are in pain. So this is how the skilled practitioner needs to respond. So this now is the third and the fourth line. Thinking with compassion, it is due to the arisal of afflictions that all this has emerged in their minds. So whatever they are expressing, whether physically or verbally, it is an expression, a physical or verbal expression of their state of mind. And one can clearly recognize then their state of mind is afflicted, which means they are suffering. They are not in control over their own minds. Their afflictions are running rampant. Their afflictions are directing their speech and their behavior. Recognizing the pitiful state of these beings, compassion should arise for them. And with the arisal of compassion, the softening of one's heart towards them, generate the firm and stable wish. May these beings abide in peace. May they gain control over their minds and thereby gain freedom from their afflictions. This is my responsibility to guide them to attain such a state. I need to ensure that I develop myself ever further and interact with them slowly, skillfully, so that their afflictions can subside, and I can guide them to gain freedom from their afflictions, to give rise for a yearning here, that may all beings abide in peace.
Yuri kabla kala tesan jiksa shanda dikil matedi ane chele yang zu pa cho de dine shan chi shanda dike ki kyo kala san de le rukya chi na so ya la so ba dine ngu do tika san ko de shi chele ra san san ko zo ta do ke je ko na ji dine ko zu ti chi ro a dine shin a de mele dine ki ngu ro chi sa dine za dine kablia ane ka chele da la an dine ki nyomo semje nyomo ke wala ra wa yo ma dine sa da so su ki pa ya wo che be ne so so ya ane kyo je je kan da ane chiki yungu le tene za simchu cha ho ma tele ya ane sim kyo che simchu cha che ane di jawa di pa dorya yo ma res tele ya ane pe nyingdu ke ko ti ho le ya nyingje ke ane dene ke ko nyomo de ye ni se wa chiki sem pe nyingdu ke che du chen od nyam ne nang go res sung go wa da ta cha yu sem ba di tene nang go wa da.
in our reflections, take what you observe in the world, see how this is true, that our beings respond under the control of their afflictions, that they have no free will. Their desire, their anger arises and leads to their resulting speech and physical behavior. They have no control over that. And whether they're childish or arising in the form, or have arisen in this life as a human being, or they've arisen in this life, taken birth in this life as an animal, we can see it throughout the world. If one sees a street dog that's hungry, the compassionate thing to do is to feed it. And it's good to do so. But that dog needs to eat that food immediately, because otherwise another street dog, with jealousy arising, will attack them, wanting to steal that food from them that they both are in need of. This just is how it is for childish beings. They are governed by their afflictions. And by being governed by their afflictions, they suffer, and they continue to suffer. The Bodhisattva knows this, and therefore compassion naturally will arise within them.
That in ma the Karsung that Yembo Tinigi, Yembo community, Chidangi, that Chion, Tumo, Yembo, the Ji Kanganya, the Tumo, so Tumo, my so solid, the Ji, and Yembo some diet she would have been. She shall meet us, the Yamna Karaka Chimbi, Yamna Chad, did the Shimba to Shore, Sabian Yamna Chana, Sabian or Yamna Chidan and the Shore, then the Shimba Chore, then someday shut up Yamna Karaka Chivina, did our more the Karim Basham, Yamna Chedan Kade Bashin watch, Chazan did it, Sambatan Joa, Tembuch and Yamna Chore, said the Kasa. Yamma to kiss Yamma to the Shuruade, Chidan Shakoran, Simki, Lava Suntan, Yambo to Spomnati, Yamna Jashero. I didn't matter. She only had China and Nimbochi tomorrow, didn't it? Such come not in my soon do it.
Well, the tumble.
And the tomorrow, that is shared that my Lavier. Tomorrow, said Nimbo, tomorrow, Nimbo come down the Lavier that.
Yeah, Karitumbo.
Didn't see love you in that she's a law in that she the tomorrow. Kissing Sheba, I think on the tomorrow. Tumo mai bukra soso aran li nyamnen che thadba sombar eji shindo nge da rabje da den da gui da xie se ji ngo sa xie da ji jie da je be den ma xin da de ba xie san di ba ra de kare la na denga zo shindo nge da rabje da su de kare nyamnen che be ne jin be nyamnen che ba ne jin be nyamnen da bo jin be nyamnen che jin be ngo xin ba che den nyamnen che xi ba nyamnen che gu re sa then随便你们来这边的随便看这些，你们这样看这随便我们当看这些，提醒把这公布的，听的随便专注3点写了，咱们你就公布的，咱们这就是公布了，当播看了公布的，你就我们都先行过来噻的，可是这样的，但你们看的这边呢，当播要我们公布去先把写过来，听的，对吧？定不起，听的就话的，3把的就话的定不起。贵些的机构可能你们结果来在看上，但是你们的新些什么的是学会多的些嘛，我的呢，大的你们这边搞不啦，的那个深圳米团吧，台湾米团吧，的你们给往给都是可能见，搞结果来是呢，的你也咱们就公布的，的那个，可能你们接的，告诉让我有买的什么大的可能也，人家方面他可以你们的希望学什么我那么讲。可以用我的研究这件事情，你都觉得都写过来噻，我都是呢。但是说的，你们这边搞了听的用过来噻，听嘛，你其他所以他你们这你们电脑的嘛，都是也送多，他只是个10家去的也话去的。
This outline that we're in now, we started with the final verse last week. So that verse presented, I think it was 7 qualities to develop within in order to protect the training of the mind from degenerating. So the training of the mind that one is wanting to protect from degenerating, these are the 6 perfections, love, compassion, and so forth. The things that the Bodhisattva is training their mind in, or the topics the Bodhisattva is training their mind in. So last week looked at various individual aspects that the practitioner needs to engage in so as to protect their mind from degenerating. So there was definite conviction, there was absolute faith, there was being steadfast, respectful, and so forth. So this was last week in the 55th verse. Now, what the 56th verse has presented is whilst the practitioner is developing these qualities in their mind, remembering the first definite conviction involved coming to understand the entity of what generosity is, or ethics, or patience, understanding what that practice is, how to cultivate it, what obstacles one may encounter whilst cultivating it, how to overcome it, and so forth. In other words, gaining definite conviction in the process, free of doubt or free of any doubt or lack of certainty. So whilst one is doing so, as well as developing one's faith and developing a steadfast motivation and so forth, one will be engaging with others. Amongst them, many will be the childish. They will not be advanced spiritual practitioners. They will be either beginners or they will not be spiritual practitioners. So they will be childish, not knowing what to adopt, what to abandon, and so forth. When one does so, one needs to protect one's mind in the way guided here, understanding that they have no freedom. They're acting under the control of their afflictions. And that understanding or that recognition should lead to compassion arising within. So this verse tonight, the 56th verse, is how to protect our mind when engaging in others, protect the training in our mind from degenerating whilst engaging with others. And those 7 qualities we looked at last week, they were about how to develop the mind so that it does not degenerate. The trainings in it do not degenerate. So these outlines I'm referring to, they come from the great commentary to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Geshe Thubten
Rabten.
Now we come to the 57th verse. There we see the final line in the English can be translated in 2 different ways. Energetically perform for others and oneself virtue that is free from faults, and always apprehend with this mind that I am selfless like an emanation, or is without pride like a magical apparition. First line in the Tibetans, our second line, virtue that is free from faults. So Geshe just explained it, but that's what it is. In other translations, it's expressed in many ways, because this verse is, let's say, can be translated in many different ways or understood in different ways. But the meaning is virtue that is free from faults. So what our second line, the first line in Tibetan literally says, is faults free from functioning thing. So what this means is virtue free from faults. there are two types of faults. There are those which are natural faults or misdeeds and prescribed faults or misdeeds. Natural faults refers to something that whomever does it, it is naturally non-virtuous by nature. Killing, stealing, lying, harsh speech, and so forth. So there are a number of things that whomever does it, non-virtue is accumulated. So these, and then there are chip.
이런 게 하시니 가도 마도 버리 거셔버려 내자다. 지금 하는 제일 쉬요. 아딘 길리길리스.
So these are of the two types. This is the first, those which are naturally non-virtuous, and whomever does them accrues non-virtue. Therefore, they are to be abandoned by all practitioners. So these are non-virtues that one can do physically, verbally, or mentally, and all practitioners need to abandon those which are naturally non-virtuous.
제가 라신이 하나 마도 봤을 때 간에 실례해서 니네 실례고 해서 되게 다 라신이 하나 봐. 제비 하나 마도 봤어야지 나 랍중 다 아주 개인이 돈벌랭게다 랍중기 도마 유현적이 마도 샹달라 아니 김비체나 디바메바 아니 랍중나 디수기 체나 아니 디바 여바데라 인테니기 디바데라다 제비 하나 마도 봐래 그래.
The second type of misdeed or fault are those which are prescribed. So this is many of the vows of the ordained, where they have willingly made a vow, a promise, not to do certain things. So if an ordained were to do them, they would be going against their vows and therefore to be non-virtuous. But for a non-ordained person to do that same thing, no non-virtue would be accumulated because they've made no such promise.
어디에서 집에 하나 마도 발라도 제바 시대에서 수주기 나 상계기 되는게 결혼 제주고 말에 신의 상계기 바가 진제네 상계 수수 상계기 송반다가라 지긴세 케린체 두셰바이나 제바인자 안디 제레 안데다 가위기 내가 제바이나 되네 집에 하나 마도 상계기 손셰비 제바 제주고 말에 집에 손셰바 대단 가와인자 가위 내가 제바자 되네 예바실이 버려 스텔레 집에 하나마도 발고 해제래.
And so these prescribed misdeeds, these are where one has made a promise to the Buddha or to the lineage of the Buddha that one will not do certain things. And it's due to the power of that promise, one takes the vow, or the power of the promise in the ceremony, one takes vows, and therefore either accumulates virtue by living in accordance with those vows, or accumulates non-virtue by contravening what one has promised not to do.
이게 지게 미사와주발라 소바이나 랍초이나 김발라 미사와주바 제바이나 디버스카요 마로와 ene rabjun de ge na sanyi gi de le ya mis sanyi rabjun le misa chu shu ma se che ba se ene rabdu chwa de ke te che ba de ke lien che al rab chwa in za ma o ba na che le ya ne misa chu ba yin na ene misa chu be gi ti ba che ko ti ba di go che di ga re se sanyi gi che ba da ngai wi gi ti ba le.
So, for example, the ordained have taken a vow of celibacy. So, should they engage in non-celibate behavior, they would be accruing non-virtue because they made that promise. Whereas for those who have not made such a promise, the non-ordained, if they engage in non-celibate behavior, there's no non-virtue involved in that. They have not taken a vow to be celibate.
rabjo namgi ane sangye kudene simje soju chigime soju bangi sene kelenje rwa jezan kelenje banza da sangye ge soju che chugo marabdu chuan soju che chugo mares nan paga dene nga jogi da rabjo yodenge chigmes de kelenje ge kelenje rwa dene kelenje ne simje soju che baina chisu simje soju che baina dene ra신이 카나마 티베 티바데야 지워레 제베 카나마도 티바제 니 지워레 김발라야 라신이 카나마 티바마도 제베 카나마도 티베 징마도 기고 말 대한줄에 니 지워라 줄에 니 지워레 제자다 티베 제바네 티바 소지베 티바 제바네 티바니 티바 체용거래 지금 개와 제바네 개와니 티바 개와 체용거래 지단의 소지베 방피기 개와 직제 ane sanji ye ka de tsibige dine sanji ka na shin kai san tubige dipa chi gewa chikche gewa nisa de gore sina dipa cheba ne dipa che gewa jiwa na gewa che cheba.
In the case of killing, the ordained have also taken a vow not to kill. But if they were to kill, they would be accruing a particularly powerful non-virtue, because they are both accruing the non-virtue that comes from naturally killing, or the non-virtue that naturally comes from killing, as well as the non-virtue of breaking a vow. Whereas a person who does not have the vow not to kill, should they kill, they will be accruing non-virtue because it's a natural misdeed, but it won't be as strong as if an ordained person were to do it. So this is the case then for non-virtue, but it's also the case for virtue, in the sense by promising not to do something and not doing it, then one accrues virtue from merely not doing something. Whereas if someone hasn't made a promise not to do something, and they just merely don't do it, they are just merely not doing it. Whereas if you made a promise not to do it, then you are accumulating virtue.
Atisha, da kana mato ba ase, da kana mato ba me ba la de da me be ngo bo la de dine kana di ba mai bi ge ngo bo la de kewa de ko da ngo bo. Da de ne ge kewa chin de so ge da ge we nyam len ane chin ba chu je so ba chun de sam de na so ba da ka de nyam ne che ba na ge we nyam ne che ba la ngo bo la da ga ri chi de chi go se ne da sim je wang chi xin se de da rang yi ane nyo mo rang yi ku so ju ge nyo mo ba da de sha nyo mo ba sha dan je ba bang ne an bang bi ge bang ba ta ba bang ba to ya da ane sa ye ko ba to bi chi du ane di wang du chen ne ane nyam ne che da ane ya xian sim jian tam je ku yu dong le zhe je sim jian tam je di gi dong le zhe je ya ane di gi de dian ba le dian bi gi de ni gi di duan da chen ne rang da xian sim jing gi duan di wang du che che ane nyam ne chi ko le sa shi.
So reading the first two lines together: energetically perform for others and oneself virtue that is free from faults. So virtue that is free from faults is any virtuous deed that one engages in. For example, ethical restraint, generosity, patience, whatever it may be. And when one does so, do so with the joint motivation of what you have in the first line, do so energetically for others and oneself. This means have Buddhahood as your goal, and therefore one strives in virtue so as to abandon one's afflictions together with their seeds and imprints, so that one's wisdom can become ever purer and progress ever closer to attaining enlightenment. And the reason to want to attain enlightenment is so that one can be of ever more benefit to others, particularly guiding others to achieve their own liberation. So therefore, whatever virtuous activity you engage in, have as your very motivation to become a Buddha for the sake of others.
And now, I give Yamle Chimba Subala Sobata Tundi Yamlen Karecheva that Topja Kasut, Richi the Shores and Topja, and the Dagi Yumobat, Bachata Cheba Banye, San Yokopan to be Chirdo, Net Yamle Cheata. And Chedu Java, and next week Chedu Java Karajin, Chedu Java Semja Tam Je, Yutandalia, and Dosine, want to change Yamne Chew, yes, said that's a Sembanam, you do Sim Nangorwa, do Sim Sumurwa.
This is the very way that Bodhisattvas practice. At the forefront of their mind in every endeavor is their desire to abandon the afflictions together with the seeds and imprints in order to become a Buddha for the sake of others. So they're very clear that what they are doing is for the sake of others, but to be particularly skillful with others, they need to attain Buddhahood. And in order to attain Buddhahood, they need to abandon the afflictions together with their seeds. So therefore, whatever the Bodhisattva is doing, whether quietly alone or directly with others, their motivation is for the sake of others.
That the Negi Yamlen Chedu, that's also Rangi, that's also Rangi do Sinyam Chede, ngay di ne nyamne chi yue sembe da ya jing ngay du shi ne semje tamje sanje ko ha tubi chirdu nyamne chi yue ngay ane semje tamje ge danda le ya nyamne chi yue sembe du shi ne su su ngay de su nyamne chi yue sembe nyamne chi sam da ye de da ngay nyamne chi yue se da shan da ge du shi ge ba ngay chi yue sembe je ya nga je ge ge ane nga yung go wa da de ne za de le ya ane sam ma kar tang wo se ne de le ya ane chi zhu ba xin de nga me ba se de其实当我读现在人们去身边上大一点，其实我现在搞读现在，我现在我让些嘛，把什么通过来些的呀，我现在读现在当你冇把现在这个帮的三九个帮特别去等你们去，你深圳他们这一点啊，你们这把的，深圳他们这个团的，深圳的地区主要的，东啊县是地区主要，深圳他们就可以东啊的三九所以归为地团的来去身边。但你的人们去什么大一点，其实都什么大，你那个当我的什么个当我是，原来东北人公务的是什么当我的，东北人新标的新标过年公务，你们去我的也是。其实在东北人什么大的，我写什么大的，我写的都是那什么大的，我写的蓬勃当这些，刚才也怕对呢，大把略对些，怕略大把满眼把这个让个我呢主题呗。我写的早就有嘛的，什么的，那个都现在什么当过的，这的。
这个是的，这个还有是的。
on the其实他当我东北义工部的，东北义工在这些边的，但是这身体吧，对那的些收入啊，你来东北的啊，是什么大的，其实我的那公务员什么大的，其实我写的，干的是都是他为心就写的东北义工。心就写我的这对俺写的，他让的蓬勃的切切看来嘛对吧？略怕大把买烟吧，然后我呢主把去找我给你民族身边的什么当过的一些。
The Bodhisattva has at the forefront of the mind that I need to abandon my afflictions together with their seeds and imprints so that I can become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Within this expression are several references to I. The way to gain Buddhahood is through the union of bodhicitta and emptiness. So the Bodhisattva repeatedly engages in meditation on emptiness. This I that is wanting to abandon the afflictions, this I that's wanting to attain Buddhahood, this I that's wanting to benefit others, how does this I appear to my mind? Does it exist in that way or not? The I appears, or the self appears, as if it is in control. It controls these aggregates. It controls the body and mind. That there is free will. But when one investigates, one doesn't find this. So here, the Bodhisattva meditates on the emptiness of inherent existence. And the ben Juba do Name, Juba Shindoles, Juba said the Benem, Chigi Juba Tuenje, Ben Semjan Taru, which you choose Shabaina, Chazang Mola, Pachimichin the town when they read, Tading when they did to Benjibajin, Tading when they read Marwa, Chazada Juba, she drew Shabachmato, down when they read Marwa, could Tribi get Taru, which you saw, Juba Shmato, down when they read Marwa, Chazadi did, Chazading another Kansa said. 显起了对你主呢略怕大把在嘛多显起了嘛对吧略嘛大把可能我呢主办我呢的有嘛的是的那些哪些的怕主办那些怕主些把那些去嘛多啊呢然后我呢主的去没啊略怕大把怎么有把的是别个那个主办心这
这个心路俺没把是的，你俺没把是，俺是的，这个那些跑略大把子有把马多，略大把马也把，下来马就把人我你这把的没啊，什么当过那些，但这个心的俺没把是这。
So here the Bodhisattva looks how she appears, and she'll look and see, it appears as if there's control over the body, control over the mind. The I has this control, but no such I can be found. There is no I in control of the body and mind. Rather, it is empty of existing in the way that it appears. And here the Bodhisattva comes to realize emptiness. Thereafter, after familiarizing themselves with emptiness, that they are empty of existing in the way they appear, final step is then, so how does the self or the I exist? It exists merely labeled by mind onto any of the aggregates. This is all. This is not how the I appears, but this is how the I exists, as merely labeled by mind onto any of the aggregates. And in fact, this is not so different from a magical apparition. If a skilled magician conjures a spell and a horse appears, it appears as if there really is a horse there, and the audience are flabbergasted at this beautiful horse that's appeared. But in reality, it doesn't exist in the way that it appears. It's empty of existing in the way that it appears. And this then is the meaning of the third line. So this one, I'll mix these two translations. I am selfless, like a magical apparition.
제가 녀모바 탐지기 녀모 주고 디네자다 투모의 녀모세 돈이 겁나 되샤기 말에 되샤기 말에 유딜라 동반이 겁나 유딜라 되샤기 말 유딜라 콩저기 말 유딜라 나게 자요 말와 제자디 되네 저기 제자 디네기 동반이 겁바이나 제자 녀모바 탐지기 깨와라 가구요 반자 투모의 녀모세 검수디 제자 투모의 녀모 검수 스테이지에 이 투모의 녀모 검수 사이에 디레 돈다 가서 동반이 공부했나 녀모가 탐지기 녀모 책으로 와. 근데다 세나 동의 선보 공부했나 세나 지부의 녀모마도 전다기 녀모 책으로 말해. 에 서버 공부했나 코로코롱기 지콘의 계를 가고마도 세나 계를 가야라 되는 책으로 말고 소소 책으로 와. 다리디 동반이 공부했나 동반이 공부했나 되네 녀모 탐지기 녀모 책으로 찾아는 There's
a need to rely on antidotes as we move through the world, as we sit quietly, and there are many antidotes to the afflictions that are presented. Most are unique antidotes in that they are an antidote to a specific affliction. For example, cultivating the mind of generosity, this open heart that wants to give of oneself, this is an antidote to miserliness. Doesn't have much impact on anger, but it overwhelms miserliness. The antidote that's presented in this verse, though, is a common antidote, and that is common to all the afflictions. And that is the wisdom realizing emptiness, this wisdom that understands reality. It is able to eradicate all the afflictions, and therefore is a common antidote.
ngā kia kia wā kai mindu wā sāmbi tēne ngā kia oda ngā kia mē pa yung o yu mē pa chi o yung nguri e sē shi ngā mē pa sē de ngā kia bā chā shi
Trooper le,
chūpa shindu
cause ya tu sik locally ya, and check the true why they just accept the true idea. It's a trick. They shepherd the dark night.
i de de chūpa ma chik chū sha ba ina di chūpa tā chi chūpa ina di tā ngō ne ma rwa che sa di ko pa zē ne tā ngō ne duwa mi de zē ne tā ngō ne nye yo ma rwa che sa de ko nā ya la tā nā shi nāng gō de dan da ngō ma la tā chi yo ma rwa di chūpa si wā chūpa de es che sa di chik tā di chū sha ba de ma to chū sha ba nā ya tā nā nā yo de de ngō ma la tā shan zē ne tā ngō ne nye yo ma de es di nā shi ngā zo ngā se di ma tā nā ngā zo ka nā ngā zo chen la kāng lai ma do rāng ngō ni chūpa nāng gō de es ngā zo de du shin shim chū tā shan zē be chen na kā ya nye yo ma de es tōng sā chi ma do nye yo ma de es an da gan xue ba de se ngā di da pa ming tā ba zam de yo ba de es ji ngā du shin de chi xie rwa di ne za da ngā rāng xin ma do du sam da de che za da ngā shen le che ba do pa ba de es de ngā ko le ngā zhag de se be ge ngā ke yo a chi kai min du a su ngā ye ke hua yo ma de es che za ngā ye de yo ma de es ngā ye ngā me ba se ngā ye yo ma de es de che za ngā se de rang ngō ne zhu ba chi me ba da da sam chi ma do min du sam be ha go yo de de ngā shen le che ba do pa ba de es ngā shi wu chi ya yin sim be lom sim da ngā ye de yo ma de es ngā me ba se de de le ngā me ba se de ngā rang xin me ba se de de la yan cha yo ba de da ngā me ba se ngā rang xin ma do gom be ngā shen le che ba do pa be ngā shi wu che ba do pa ba yin sim lom sim ngā ye de yo ma de se ngā me ba se ngā ye yo ma de ngā ye yo ma de se de la cha ni ga cha bo re
The benefit of receiving an oral explanation of a text is that one can come to gain a far deeper, more expansive understanding of the text than merely from reading it. So an illustration will be the third line in the Tibetan, the fourth line in the English, which, because of the way it has been written, it can be understood in differing ways. So in the written, published translations, only one can be written, but in an oral explanation, then they can both be presented. So the way that this, again, the third line in the Tibetan, the fourth line in English can be understood is, as this already been expressed, the Bodhisattva will be focusing or prioritizing the meditation on emptiness, this general common antidote, common to all the afflictions or applicable to all the afflictions, looking for how the I appears, which is as if it is in control of the body and the mind, but recognizing no such I can be found, and is therefore empty of existing in the way that it appears. But the I still exists. It's not that one does not exist, but only labeled by mind onto the aggregates in a way that is similar to how one would imagine a horse, an appearance of a horse, a magical apparition being labeled horse. It appears as a real horse to those under the spell of the magician, but it is not a real horse. No horse can be found. So this is the one meaning. The second is that the Bodhisattva will also be on guard against the root affliction of pride, recognizing that in this expression of I am striving for my enlightenment in order for me to be the one to benefit others, there are many opportunities here for an inflated sense of self. And this needs to be guarded against, and recognize that there is that this inflated self certainly does not exist and is an affliction, and therefore that it too, the self not existing in the way that it appears, there is no basis for pride. There is no basis for thinking of myself as being remarkable because of my acts of generosity or my ethics or my kindness, but rather to recognize that there is no basis for this pride, and thereby to recognize the emptiness of that affliction and upon which it is labeled.
Tene ki chubu chugen de la, ne gangsa changshu senpa yung kore, Trachumba Yungure, Sanje Yon Sigre, Denegi, Membigi, Lamnama Shubigi, and Kasa Yon Sigi, Song Yungure, Namba Yungure, Chiroba Yungure, Trubutuga, Naso Yungurua, Tal Truba Inada, Nekareli Truba Jal Truba Nako, Gueva Carido and the two, and the Trubutugenda, Tugan Gazala, Trubopo, Naso Yosurade. The two of the Changisemba, the enemy Changisemba Ingoma, Changisemba Truba Yungure, Changisemba Mayimbi Truba Yungure, Sanyu Truba Yungure, and Nambe or Nambe Chiruba Yore, she's something young was you Topchi, that was I check Denigi and Yamlendu, think it's in Tempo Yeting Tigida, Truba 20 Trubeke, Truba 20 Mushim, and Yamlen treating it in Trupche, Trupsazna, not Denigi Temba Yungor, Sulinat and to Yungore. Yedeji Truba the Tachi the patient, Shemadande, Truba de Kare Mili Truba Yungure, Shin Truba, Sambalo Truba, and that's all Truba Yungamarim or Trubagi. Together.
And this word, again, in the different ways the Tibetan can be read, that thus far has been translated as a magical apparition, can also be translated as an emanation. So emanations are, in one sense, not to be exaggerated in terms of their importance because there are so many different types. So there are those which are really a big deal. They're emanations of Buddhas, they're emanations of Arya Bodhisattvas, and emanations of Bodhisattvas, but also foe destroyers, solitary realizers, hearers. They all emanate because any practitioner who has developed actual shamatha, actual calm abiding, they can then develop the capacity to emanate. So therefore, this word translated thus far as magical apparition could also be translated as emanation.
Adonala, Denigi, Suzuki, Kiwi, Yamlin, Karacheva, and Yamlin Chibi, Kabla, Semjan Tamjegu Tandagi, you want to chin the Yamlin Chiana, Deni Yamlin Chibi, Kabla, and Tomba to be Sheraki, Tonye, some the Tonye to Sheraki, Symbioton and Yamlin Cheja, Tushnum Chegores. Initiating a Yamaba, D. Taudu Sungacha, City Chesa, Sem de Kidina, Tenegi, Nakia, Meba, Sem de that Tautu, Tutatuan, Tenegi, the Kiwi Yamnechidu, and Tomba to be Sheriki, Symbioton and Yamneche, such Sumore.
Moving now from the third to the fourth line, which was in the English, the final line of the Tibetan is the third line. So once the Bodhisattva will be striving their meditation on emptiness so as to overcome any particular pride, in particular, pride against the good qualities they are developing, such as bodhicitta or with the wisdom realizing emptiness. But also, they will recognize that they are without a self or selfless, without a truly existent self, in order to progress towards the attainment of the goal of Buddhahood for the sake of others. And they will continually strive in this way, or always apprehend with this mind. So they will rely on this mind, which is the wisdom realizing emptiness, as the antidote to their afflictions, and as a primary tool by which to achieve their desired goal of Buddhahood for the sake of others.
Adene, da Yamlin Libai, and Yamlin lecture was Yamlin Chibi Kabla, Yamleche Adil Sumisere, and Negi. Rinji learning David Cho, and Toba Yana Yansam near, Semdet double Raptor, Rabdo Mio Sonras.
Then coming to the 58th verse, the final verse in this outline, having finally gained the supreme freedom and having contemplated it repeatedly over a sustained period, this mind, which is now like the great Mount Meru, maintaineth thus completely unshakable.
Then 먼저 기위게 되네게 수좀 써야다 침바 제베 안에 아준지 되네게 냠몰람 도시 냠는 제발에 되네 디스징보 줄련 발에 되네 디링 아나 아주게 대비 텐쇼시 세드 대비 텐쇼 톱스 대비 텐사데 지사 대비 루틴 개발진들이 토발에서 송골다 당보만 주기다 네 지당보지 인시론의 대비 쇼세드 개와마마 결림부는 안에 대주 루틴 토비하기 규칙의 포선 소바디 사제 아니 디링 안저 안 루틴 초도 규범 루틴디 토비어에서 지사 도스인데 다 대비 루틴 뭐 송와다 뭐 송와다 뭐 송와다 책으로
Having finally gained the supreme freedom. This is a presentation we've covered in this text, but certainly you'll know well from the Lamrim, which is that after many lifetimes of wandering in samsara, but having accumulated virtue, now, in this very lifetime, we have finally attained the freedoms and endowments of this precious human rebirth. So that's the meaning of freedom here, the freedoms and endowments of a precious human rebirth. All this merit that we have accumulated over lifetimes, right now, we are experiencing that result. This is the very opportunity that we have been yearning for, and now we have attained it.
Esa digi limrim nala sobaina daju ngosoada daju topkawa samba se sungkore chesa daju dawi lutinche adini rinshi kyu puson soba gyuringbo sabare saname tobare siri da jiza gyu saeti daju gyu saeti denegi surim soya tang ane soba komya ta zunje sumya la soda molan deba la soba dene jimba tangwa la soba nyemne kuweza jiza gyudike sa kawen sa dirige daju lutin topkawa ese daju lutin ngoy soa dan daju lutin topkawa se ati dan limrim sobain dan da sikti iti sungwar dan dale.
So here, call to mind the teachings on Lamrim that you've learned and the meditations you've done on this precious human rebirth, reminding yourself of just how rare precious human rebirths are and how difficult they are to achieve. And they're difficult to achieve because of the great causes that all need to be accumulated to have a rebirth such as this. All of us are experiencing the results of ethical restraint, of generosity, of patience, enthusiastic perseverance, and prayer. These needed to come together to have a fully fledged precious human rebirth like we have all achieved. And this precious human rebirth, what makes it so precious is the great meaning or the great potential that it can achieve, and unparalleled throughout the universes, what we hold in our hands.
제자다 된주 리딘 디페 된체와 임바지 삼고리에 된체보 제자 된주 리딘 델라든데 디페 된체보레 스카르스나 된주 리딘 디 텐텔야 안에 디케와 치마 응원도 고마 토야기 규사에네 규사투에데 케와 치마 안코코서 고용와서 동아 탈라 주제 탈비 람 탈바 토야기 람 냠네 제바이네 텐딜라 냠네 제제 탈바 톱투고바 안디마제 심제 탐지게 된다려야 잠니제 전주심 콤파전 중에 냠내 치제 산예 고방 토에 냠내 치바네 텐델라텐 톱투워 제가 텐디베 마시기 사침보 슈시레스 된나 침보 된나베 마시 개침보 투투에기 텐캬바 체제레 제가 데네자 텐델라 텐델라텐 랑기 냠는제 랑기 두마 녀모마 바샤다 제바 방토 그래 디마지 텐델라 류딘 포소바 텐델라텐 랑기 냠는제네 셴리아 셴기 두마세 디게 두미레 판도 개침보 제투고 제가 템페 마세 캬버체 슈치리 선비게타 데네기 된침보 임바디 야네 야도 삼당고리에세 제자다 다와 데비기 다와 데주텐디 뭐송 데주텐디 토베기 톱가와레 세베 삼다야다 안데주텐디 토바는 빼마세 개침보다 된침보 된다 셔보 시투투게 투야기 캬버체 슈치리 선비고 오두시네 야네 야도 삼당고리에세.
First line then is recognizing that this great rebirth, this great precious human rebirth, is so rare. And their analogies are presented in the Lamrim, as well as being difficult to attain because of all the causes that are acquired. And this is something we've achieved. The second line then points to its great purpose. How that we have the opportunity now to live a life of great meaning. So the second line, having contemplated it repeatedly over a sustained period, this points to the outcome of the meditation on the precious human rebirth, where we feel like we have won the lottery of lifetimes. We have achieved the greatest of prizes, in that within the very palm of our hands exists the potential to, at the very least, accumulate the causes for further opportunities such as this, to close the possibility to rebirth in the lower realms in our next life. But more than that, we have the potential to become bodhisattvas in this life, to reduce the strength and frequency of the affliction so that we can develop calm abiding, a mind that is calm and peaceful, and develop this then into bodhicitta itself, become bodhisattvas in this lifetime, and thereby have a great benefit on others. The very least, not to bring harm, but many will be able to impact them positively, encouraging them to accumulate the causes to ensure their ongoing good rebirths. All of this and so much more can be achieved because of this precious human rebirth. So when one has contemplated this repeatedly over a sustained period, a great joy and determination and focus comes to one's mind. All the trivial concerns are swept away. They are seen in their true light as unimportant. So the Dharma is what comes to matter to one.
Denigi doing Jimbo some done dinner, and a garchi or a sene, some down or sene. That is Zangi, Denigi doing Jimbo to get in Chabajan top to Batelea, in that day Yamlin Majebaina, and they let Yamlin Majebache, and by leading Meva Chason and Pepamburia some day, yet set out in Delia, and a jiggy, Lamza, and Semja Tamjigi Tandala, Koyotuma. Yomo Bacha the Chiba Baja, Semja Tamisanyo Toba Chi, Sembi, in Semja Tamisanyo Tom, the Semja and your crew dunga Tata Lutrage, Ya Sanya Sala Quiggy, Sembigi, Denigi, some Sem de Sem said, Denigi Semje, Semja Tamji doing a Sayoko Toba Chi, Semja Tamji doing a Sayoko to which in Argent doing Yam, Tarchimba Chi, Jane, you do San Jane, then the Semja Tamji crew dunga, Dredge Ya Sanya Salangi, then the Quiggy, Sembi. Some of the Andoshin, same dinner genes, the other Raptors, Rab the Mio Swatchat, the nigger some of the Bejic, somewhat Japnashi, Timbuche, and Guameba, to share some Dati Yamnache or as I swore. Same tether, Rapta or Rab the Mio Swatchat.
So through having reflected well on this incredible opportunity we have, having seen its rarity and its great purpose, its great potential, we then develop this determination. I will embrace this opportunity fully. I will not let it go to waste. When the end of this life comes and I look back at this last period, a smile will come on my face, recognizing that this final period of my life I embraced fully and utilized well and developed excellent qualities within. This is how we develop stable determination, and that is reflected in the third line. This mind, which is now like the great Mount Meru, this most powerful of stable mountains, this mountain that cannot be moved or wavered in any way because of its great strength. This is the determined attitude to become a bodhisattva. That strength of determination is what we develop.
She could, yeah.
Rub the Mio Sword Jason. She said, Rub the Mio Dimbuch, you are never Dimbuch and Yamnache will said, so I chastity.
And with a stable motivation, then one is cultivated repeatedly over a sustained period, one maintains it. One doesn't forget. One recalls it again and again, ensuring our focus on Buddhahood for the sake of others, thereby utilizing this precious human rebirth. We maintain it, the fourth line, maintain it completely unshakable.
Rub the Mios and Guamebasi or the Kuyota, Guamebasi or Guamebachene, that took Yamnan Mutish Yamnache or what?
And unshakable, as in unchanging, it would be so stable that we could not even notice any wavering, any change at all. completely unshakable.
Yeah, to end on that situation.
I have a question about that a couple of the verses that we made out before, about the fifth, just in terms of Geshe's explanation of the lama karma of the months we can. So it's just, it's, for instance, in verse 50, when it's talking about, a wish to just stick harshly or blame others and remain affable. And also 53, having a desire to speak, without purpose, and remain quiet. They're both physical, they're both verbal actions that I think, refraining from quite strongly, even though you've got the desire. But then also, I'm not sure where the outcomes in this. So, is there also, with that restraining, I don't think it could be at the same time, but there's ill will in it, or ill will in the terms of to blame, and in the nonsense, the sort of like, that's some ignorant feeling that's permanent. Can there be those two, like a refraining and a refraining, which is a virtue, and a negative?
Yep. So, if I understand you correctly, so you recognize the affliction. Let's say you're wanting to criticize someone. So it's just like an ill will. So you see the affliction. But then can you, while your mind is afflicted, also in a way that is virtuous, remain like a log. So the virtue and non-virtue present together.
Well, not. But I think they couldn't be both together.
Is that the question? Is that the question?
Well, the question is, to me, it feels like there's something strong and wood going on because you're refraining from the speech, and you're sort of knowing the type of mind you have with that, that negative mind. So there's something wood going. You recognize that, and you're remaining like a ball. Right. So just the one example maybe is easier to talk about, but then it's also like very concerning because it's also ill will is still there. Do you see what I mean? So I don't think it could be at the same time, but is there those two partners going on, or is the ill will because you're sort of like disturbed by the light you have? Maybe it's not anything. So I just had some doubt that.
Okay. And here's my point. That's the number of the economics help about that in it. Any woman and Shibaki, that's all. That's all. Session, that's all. That's all. Your mom that do. Then that's a single same. Then that's all. Nursing, Peter. Oh, nursing, we have have not started to connect, but WTW to the IPW. In that's single take it. They take that. People look at the then it knocks in never. Look on the absent nurse. Just in, they can be your mom. No, they she learns in Deva, the guess and that girl a year. Then is guess up, done, give us in, dropping in that never. They done up 3 years, cringe. He took, did he go? It's up for up in a year, because he called me up his leg, he called us just vessel. Then me, can he give you a leg? That is, and then cheap. Again, that, again, every leg in a cheap, we gave a leg, and he got up for young doctors.
当然这的那什么级别个不啦，心就写进结巴去，那什么几个月吧，结巴几个月吧，好不那这里人不点火的也是，人不点起怕搞火的也是，是吧？但很多那样，但这个是这人不去点嘛都不行的，但这俺这个那什么地方修车嘛当然是怕，第一怕 want to dance, Lunga with Joba, do you want to Maswache, that to Sine, Kishima Sheva, that Lugi Jama Chibashin, Kujamataji, Kaji, Shinajin, Diogo, Sidu, Shin the Gujatango Marwa, Shidashin the Gujamata Nashi, Lunga with Joba D, 70, want to dance, Lunga Joba, the Dungo Mares, or that the Disura, the Night Sura. The Shin, they said to the native.
I think this answers your question, but you tell me if not. So when vigilance notices harmful intent, for example, then mindfulness immediately will come into action, and this will apply an antidote. If one is well trained in the antidote, the harmful intent's gone. If one is not yet well trained in the antidote, one must remain like a log, not expressing the affliction until that affliction has been pacified, until it's not further dominant in the mind. So that's when, until one is well trained in the antidote so that it can be quickly applied and the affliction eradicated, then one stays silent, like a log, unexpressive.
Nusim ki na di nega su kewa yo mare. Nusim di pa kiwa sheshe hao kwe she, ndele nyebo tenje, oda shenle nyoba chin dig mare sambe, tenigi nyoba chin dig mare sambe ke, nyoba chig me sambe suwe samba je, samba ki yo du, nusim ki sewe je la ki ora. Disa nusim samla nala, ata nusim chin dig mare, nusim teni sam tang kyo ma tang me sambe samla tang yo du, samla di ki yo du, deshi New Samba Samlo di Meva Chasa Casa de Zadi DJ Kewali. Tenegi Nibi Sem de la Nyembo Tenche, the Sui Samba Chikiana, and Kawakere. Di Kawa de Chele Keren, near Nursum de Niele, Tiba de Niele, DJ la Kawakura, Tiju Temata do Nyembo Tedo, Jutimata do Namsan Kawaki or Quini, Chiki Chele Chik Kawaki or Mato, Quini Niga Duchil and Yum do Yoribus and Yongmal.
Like you correctly said, a virtuous mind and non-virtuous mind cannot be present at the same time, but they do follow, or they can follow, in quick succession, especially if one is practicing well, like mentioned here, in that harmful intent arises. So the mind is now afflicted, and therefore it's in a non-virtuous state, because harmful intent is an affliction, therefore non-virtuous. When vigilance recognizes it, mindfulness calls to mind an antidote. Now the mind is moving towards virtue because the antidote has been recalled. And assuming that antidote then is strong enough to dominate, the mind is then virtuous because the affliction is eradicated. If the antidote is not yet strong enough, it won't overwhelm that antidote. But the mind will be either virtuous or non-virtuous. It won't be both, but it can quickly move from one to the other.
Right. But so that's put in clear. But in those beginning stages where you're not quick enough to get rid of it in a reasonable time, the sort of that there is it's sort of like a nodding. It probably would have just gone in its sled. So is there some refraining? Is there some virtue of refraining in that? Breaking the habit.
If you're remaining like a log, is there, and you say you're desperate to say something nasty, but you're staying quiet, yeah? Is there some virtue in your desperation not to do this? Yeah, hopefully.
Yakode Chutunfumide, with Jetan Katsun Degade, Shingat and Chegades. Then they said of Ken Depomi to the Yomo Sucheba Yode in a Katsun Degades, Cassin, a Tikpa, a Hakoki Tut. Then they Katsukeva Sakidebe, Kariansa, but to Tikpa Sakido Biomade, Jetson Katsun Degina, Besham, Nerki European Hades, and Jetson Katsun Degiodes. Yede, Katsun Yomochi, it, the, okay, nurse Sucha for Yode and so. And they got so Shinam, Depe Kapla, give us a back.
kind of about Lunga, Chuba, Kayama, the Vision, Simnalaya, news be some days, some down in the Gawas Askaya Marwa. Some Nalaya, new be some lots of Sanjay, some day, the Lunga, Chuba, Kayama, and doing it, the Gachili Gawas Askaya Mantu.
They beginning.
Because if Lunga, new be Jawa the Gagorwa.
So in there's time when you refraining from harsh speech, but your mind is afflicted. Then your mind is afflicted, you're accumulating non-virtue. But you are at least not making it stronger by expressing it. And presumably, because of this recognition from the vigilance, later you'll purify and accumulate virtue.
Okay.
Thank you.